Hello everybody, and welcome back to the video series for MTS502. Now in this video I'm going to be starting to introduce some ideas about thinking for you in regards to preparing for your professional experience placement that is coming up in a mere number of weeks, and I'm going to be referring back to this, I'm sure, as we lead up to it, and I will be doing certainly a couple of videos on classroom management, which is all the way at topic 10, but very important that we need to be thinking about your management plan and management strategies as you get ready to go into a school. So for this video, I just want to make some, I guess, broad points about thinking about, as you go into this placement, what does that mean, and how must you be getting ready for that process, because it's very intense. Even just a short 2-week placement, 10 days in a school, will be some of the most intense learning that you'll ever probably do in your life up until that point. So I think it's really critical that as you start to prepare yourself for that experience, for that learning you'll be doing in schools. Number one, I think you need to be considering about your own kind of personal life organization leading up to that. And this sort of sounds obvious, but it's important to reiterate that because of the particular nature of the placement in terms of you're spending every day in a school, every weekday for 2 weeks. You'll probably arrive at 8 a.m. and you'll probably leave at 4:30 p.m. or 5 p.m. You really need to be preparing now. You're laying the groundwork in your life outside of your course learning to get ready for that. And that may mean shuffling around work commitments, family commitments in terms of your own kids and care for them if you have children, etc. All of that, you really need to use that old adage, get your ducks in a row. You really need to ensure that everything is as best as you can, but life always throws you unexpected curveballs and things that you have to deal with, yes, but as best as you can, you need to lay down a really good foundation of life organization, of getting everything ready in terms of making sure that you have the best capacity mentally, physically, to achieve at your best on that placement. So whatever that may mean, calling in favors from family, from friends, negotiating with your employer, you need to make that happen. You need to put that all into place now. And if you haven't started that process, I hope that you have. But if you haven't, you must start that process now. I'm sure many of you have already begun that, particularly with employers and negotiating that. I would personally recommend that you don't work at all in that 2 weeks, even if you have a Thursday night or weekend shift or evening shift. Again, you really want to ensure, if you've got any leave, use that. You really want to ensure that all of your energies are spent on that really important work in regards to planning that you're doing for the learning experiences that you're going to be given responsibility for. All the other things that you need to work and manage over that 2 weeks. It will go very quickly, but you need to have that time, particularly in the evenings, to prepare for the next day, etc. So that's the most important thing, I think, in terms of that organisation. And secondly, a broad point to consider as you think about yourself in the school. Coming to terms with this idea, and you've begun it in various forms, certainly in earlier part of this course, this notion of who is this teacher person that I'm becoming? It's actually a process that never ends. You never become that teacher. It's always shifting and moving, and it's always based on the context around you. But thinking about, who am I? Who am I crafting? Who am I working at becoming in terms of that person who's going to be ready to stand in front of a group of students, a group of teenagers, and lead the learning? Uh, who is this person that's going to be able to work with a more experienced teacher and respond to their feedback, to sit in a staff meeting or sit with colleagues who can move around the schoolyard and speak to students and work with them, or perhaps discipline them in some way, whether it's in the classroom or out of the classroom. Really thinking about this crafting a particular kind of person that you are. Uh, it's something that happens in the moment as you're doing it at times, but it's also a deliberate mechanism that you kind of you know hit the switch, as it were. So you are actually deliberately focused on, okay, I am working at this person that is a teacher, and who are they? What do they say? What do they do? How do they behave? What kinds of questions do they ask? How do they respond to feedback? And obviously, it's not a complete deviation from your own personality and the practices that you do now, your habits, your professional conduct, all of that. But it's a new version, if you like, of all of the things that you may be bringing from other employment and experience, life experience, perhaps being a parent, perhaps working in education contexts in other shapes and forms throughout your life. But I think you really need to be considering this craft, and I like that word craft, and it hits on previous discussions we've had in regard to this, the art of teaching. I think becoming a teacher, there is a craft in that. There is an art. There is a creative act involved in that process, and the process is never ending. The process is always happening, but you need to begin that journey. You're coming to the process with a whole lot of attributes and characteristics, as I say, that you're bringing from your life, that you're bringing from other experiences, professionally and personally. But you are then formulating all of that into a new way of becoming a certain kind of professional educator that is concerned with care for young people, is hopefully passionate about your subject area, that is looking to ensure that they meet the professional and technical requirements of being a teacher in the 21st century classroom, that you're coming with values, with goals, with an ethical understanding of what it means to be a teacher, maybe a focus on social justice, for example, a focus on gender, a focus on culture, on language, on creativity, on language in terms of teaching linguistics, grammar, if you're an English teacher, on mathematical understanding, on science understanding, on the humanities, whichever subject area that you're going to be teaching. All of that infuses the kind of teacher that you then project out into the world. And you get feedback. You get feedback from your students. You get feedback from your supervising, your mentor teachers, and then you continue to work at that. So starting that process now, or you probably have started it, and it's now continuing that, and thinking about and imagining. Use your. You won't be able to stop yourself probably, but imagine yourself in front of the classroom. Imagine yourself. Picture yourself saying and doing these things, managing students. There's now a lot of research that shows around that process, and if we think about doing something, and if we carefully, if we fill in the picture, so if you really put yourself, use your imagination to put yourself there in front of the students teaching your first lesson, and really fill in all the details. Think about that very carefully as much as you can. What is your body doing? What is your voice doing? How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you doing? What is the process that you go through? Imagine the students' faces, their actions, all of that. Fill it in and work with that. Really, really work with it and picture and imagine and go through that lesson as almost as if you were doing it in real time. And it has an incredibly powerful effect on the way in which then you approach that situation in the real world. That if you, and this is what the research shows, that if we, in fact, imagine ourselves doing these things, it has a powerful learning effect that you can actually learn through that. So, particularly because many of you are in all sorts of different contexts and you're learning online, and a lot of the time you might be on your own at a computer doing these things. That can be a way in which you can practice before you actually do it. And another important point to make, I feel, is making sure that you do understand all of the requirements of the placement itself, the logistical, pragmatic, and technical requirements, you might call, in terms of, how do I pass? What are the particular ways in which I'll be assessed? What are my professional responsibilities as a pre-service teacher while I am in that school? How must I dress? How must I? What time do I need to arrive? Some of these questions you will need to ask the particular school depending on the requirements of that school, particularly around, say, dress, start times, finish times, where you park, what the lunch arrangements are, what the tea and coffee arrangements are. You'd be surprised that there's some very specific rules around coffee and tea in school staff rooms. Sometimes you have to pay, other times you don't. Where you store your lunch, where you store your bag, do you need keys? How are you going to photocopy work? What about access to the computers? All of these things you need to be thinking about, and you need to get prepared. You need to ask questions. You need to perhaps visit the school site before the placement starts. That's highly recommended if possible. Obviously, sometimes the time frames are short, but many of you know where you're going to be going on your placements. Start to build a relationship with that school in terms of understanding how that school works. How is the school day structured? When are the break times? All of those things. Are there staff meetings that you need to be attending? The answer is probably yes. In that 2-week period, there'll be some. There'll likely be a staff meeting or maybe a subject area meeting. So attend those. Is there going to be a sports carnival or another activity going on at that school? How do you get involved? Can you do more? Can you help? Putting yourself out there, certainly with getting to know what that school's about. Get immersed in that culture is really important in all aspects, whether it's the small stuff like where to park, or the bigger stuff that goes on daily or weekly in that school, and have an open mind with regards to all of that. If you're going to a religious private school, perhaps you yourself aren't religious, but have an open mind about some of the rituals and routines that school has, and get involved, whether or not you have to fully participate. At least go and observe and see what's going on and how do the students respond, and make your observations in that regard. And that certainly frames the assessment 2 that you'll be doing. It's all about pointed observation and watching what goes on with your supervising, your mentor teacher, seeing how they conduct lessons, seeing how they manage the students, and learning about what's happening in those micro interactions, as well as the macro stuff, and how the school and the classroom and the students, and how all of that works, and how learning occurs. And that's a really important disposition to have as a pre-service teacher an open mind, an observational mind, uh, a mind that is maybe judging in some ways, judging in terms of your own understanding, not judging in terms of, oh, this is good or this is bad, but judging in terms of, well, how do I feel about this? How do I think about this? How am I going to perhaps use this and learn from this? And there'll be certainly things that go on in the school that you may not agree with, that you think, well, I'm surprised the teacher did that or did it in this way. But I think it is very important to sort of try and see things somewhat objectively. You can form your own opinions about what's happening, but try to get a holistic understanding. Watch, listen, learn, ask questions. Try not to pass judgment on verbally, because teachers can take that quite personally. Rather just sort of take it in and see what's happening and think about, well, maybe what are the causes of this? Is it down to the teacher's practice? Is it down to the students and the families and the communities? Is it down to the school culture, perhaps the leadership of the principal? There could be all sorts of reasons why something occurs that you may think, hang on a minute, why did that happen? That's not the best practice there. So I feel it's important to, and when I've worked with pre-service teachers, whether as a university lecturer and before as a teacher myself, and I took on many pre-service teachers as a mentor teacher, a supervising teacher, and the best pre-service teachers that I had were of that disposition. An open mind, a questioning mind, somebody who wanted to learn, absorb, take in everything around them and respond to that and come at it with energy, with enthusiasm, with a sense of how can I work in the best way possible in this context and get the most out of the school that I've had the opportunity to be placed at. Those pre-service teachers I found got the most out of the time in which they had to work with the students that I was given responsibility for, that I could then pass on to the pre-service teachers. Here, have this class, and that is for a teacher. That's a big deal. Saying, here, take this class, even for a couple of weeks, and run with it. You go. I'll show you and I'll help you and shepherd you and mentor you. But you have a go of this, and that you really need to acknowledge and say, wow, that's a big deal for a teacher to do that for me, and I need to make the most out of that and give it everything I've got. And I guess that is, at least for the time being, my final point, that give it everything that you've got. And it loops back to where I started this video, that you really need to give yourself the best opportunity to give the 2 weeks, the 10 days, everything that you have. And you'll be exhausted by the end of it, but it'll be a good exhaustion. It'll be an exhaustion in which you've said, yes, I have done my absolute best here. Learnt as much as I possibly can, and it's something that I can now take with me onto the next placement opportunity and learn and develop and improve and fine-tune and do things differently or do things better or redo the things that worked really well and continue to craft this teacher that I am becoming. So you do have to give it everything. So yeah, I hope that's provided some thinking points and some ways to start to build your capacity for the placement and make that the best that you can, because it is only a few short weeks away. So I'm going to leave this video here, and I'll certainly have another video as we get closer to the placement and to pass on my tips and advice on that, and ways in which you can make the most of it. So hope this has been useful, and good luck with the further study.